Hey everybody, so we're back with some more progress on ICBM Classics Update and Rework. So previously I showed off we did some more rework when it came to how cruise launchers work and a few other different things and so on. Since then, a lot more progress has been made. Now for starters, we do have new 16 by 16 block textures. These are probably not going to stay, so if you've seen pictures of them and everything else, they're a work in progress, and they do indeed not look, they don't look the greatest. So I'm definitely going to have to rework a few of them, especially red matter that didn't end up coming out really well, but I guess you get what you pay for when it comes to getting art commissions. Some of the other ones did work out pretty well, like nuclear we'll probably end up keeping. I'll probably just change the background of it because I want to get a much brighter background to match a lot of the machine texture changes. I will have to kind of stylize a little bit better to get some emphasis on things, and certain ones these I am going to go through and make 3D models of so that way they fit not only the new art style we're aiming for, but give a lot more ambiance based on tier. So lower tier ones probably won't have models for them, but as you start going to tier, there's a possibility some of these will have 3D, especially for antimatter and red matter. They're probably going to definitely get some work. But to recap on some other things we've got. So Cruise Launcher, it's got nice pretty UI now. Got different things. We have now added tooltips to various parts. So for those of you who are not familiar with what's going on with the UIs and forget what certain things do, you'll now have tooltips over certain icons, certain spots to tell you how much energy you've got, what's going on with here, how to do certain formats, and so on. You also get feedback on the buttons themselves to say like what's going on with the launch date and so on. Silo screen is identical in that regard, so I try to make sure both of these matched each other. That way we're not running into a case where one looks different than the other, because that was happening with the legacy version, that we had these really high res UIs, but there was very much inconsistent between how everything worked. So again, very similar tooltips, similar feedback on what's going on, and then an explanation of how accuracy works. So now you will get real-time accuracy feedback. Previous versions, it was just locking it to an inaccuracy of 30 no matter what you did. Now it will tell you what's going on with your accuracy. It won't tell you like how the math is driven. That's just more because you guys can go look it up on the wiki when I eventually add it. But accuracy is going to be driven by how far away the target is and how many missiles you are firing as part of your fire mission. Is how it's going to be handled. Of course, we have a battery slot here. The silo does not actually utilize that battery slot. And then we have EMP tower. EMP tower follows the same generalized style. I got to work on these icons a little bit more. Like that's not right there, and you realize there's no tooltip there as well. But it'll also give you feedback in the same way. So I kept the same button here. I am tempted to change the button because even though I did just say we want consistency, the EMP tower is not a launcher. Therefore, probably shouldn't have a launcher style button, but might want to have something a little bit more science type of lab style button, because you think of the EMP tower as, more of your science geeks are helping out the military type of thing, where then you have the rest of it are more of a militarized type of system. So with the EMP towers, because I can't remember if I actually showed these off, so we do have a new model here. You'll notice it is 1 block tall. Now, this is done as a way to simplify what's going on with it, as well to get rid of multi-blocks, but does not mean you cannot have a multi-block sized version. So with the default EMP tower, you're going to get pretty much the same functionality. You have well, you didn't have frequency previously, so now you have frequency, so you can now remotely trigger these. You can still redstone trigger them, still set the range, still fire them. They have now a charge up time, decharge time, so on going on with what everything's going on. As they charge up, they're going to start to slowly spin and pick up speed. You're going to see a texture animation on them, so that way kind of what's going on with the charge level. It'll start red and head to blue. I do need to work on the texture a little bit more, because depending on where you're looking at, it will change visually, just because there's some OpenGL rendering issues that are still happening with this. But it will pick up a max speed at some point, and it will actually run. Now you can extend the max range, because right now the max range is 150. So if you want to go higher than that, you can add additional layers to this to basically make this as tall as you want. Now this is mostly done as a visual thing, because all honesty, you shouldn't be making your EMP towers very big. If you are making them big, just keep in mind they no longer have modes. Previously, you could pick just the EMP missiles, just the EMP tiles. I decided that was a bit too much of an advantage. So instead of being able to be selectively destroy your stuff, if you fire your EMP tower, you're going to fry your own base in the process. So be smart about how you place your EMP towers. Put them around the distance of your perimeter base, or put a big one in the middle of your base as a last resort to protect your base from missiles. So just keep that in mind. But this will extend the range 20 per block, and the tooltips will actually explain what's going on with these. And I plan to put a little bit more information, so that way you don't need a wiki book, you don't need a guidebook to understand how to utilize the stuff. But they will actually animate and render. They're 45 degrees set off, so they look a little bit nicer as they spin. And again, you can see what I was talking about with the texture issue, where some of these are more of a transparent color, and some of these are a lot more darker. That has a lot to do with how Minecraft is calculating a lot of the stuff, and I'll have to just keep toying with it until I get it quite right. But it gives you a lot more of a feeling of what's going on with the tower, where the previous one just kind of spun. Now these are a static block mixed with Tether, so as you get further away from them, you will actually see that core de-render, but it does take some distance, but you will still see part of it there. I am trying to think of a good way to fix this so that way you can see a static version when you get too far away, but Minecraft is not really designed for that type of functionality. That gets us to the EMP tower and kind of seeing what's going on with that. It does work really well. One thing to note with the EMP tower, since most people didn't catch on to this with the 4.3 release, missiles no longer drop as items when EMP towers go off. Instead, it kills the engine. The missile will then glide down. So if you end up EMPing a missile, you will have to kind of like do things and stuff like that. So what was I at one of the things? So, okay, that covers that. And then let me go ahead and cover some of the screen changes, or actually screen and radar changes. The screen, as I noted, is about the same, accuracy and so on, so we covered that for the most part. It actually does do status a lot better, so it will now synchronize status across all connected launchers. For those who are not familiar with what I mean by connected launchers, you can effectively add as many launchers now to a single screen as you want, but you can also add more than one screen to a launcher network. So you actually have these launcher networks here that you can set up and configure and do whatever you want with, however you want to do setup-wise. And previously, these were kind of synchronizing, but they really weren't. So now if you have part of your launcher network in a unloaded chunk, but it's only unloaded to client side, but it's still loaded server side, this will now synchronize the status much more effectively, and will actually tell you what's going on. In future plan, I plan to do a scroll list to see status of all your launchers, and how they're working. We've also added a UI to the launchers themselves. So if you know from previous with the tier 3 launcher screen, you had lock height as one of your options. If you notice in here, there is no lock height. You have 3 positional coordinate and you have your frequency. Now you have lock height on each individual launcher. So launcher controls its own lock height. It also has a launcher group and a launcher index. These are not implemented features yet. What these will be used for later is you'll be able to attach a group to a screen or a group to your launching tool, so like your remote trigger or your laser detonator, to help you control which of the missiles fire when. So you can have like launcher group A that would be like chain firing missiles. You can have launcher group B that will fire 1 missile at a time, but then can have 10 missiles in your magazine. You can have C that has a higher spread, so on. You could customize it. So I'm going to put a lot more customization here. Some of the things I want to put in here is like delay to tell you how long it will delay before firing. Put in certain settings in the screens themselves, so like how groups work. So there's probably going to be a block that's going to control a lot of the group properties. That way, when it comes to each of the launchers, they're not overly complicated on how their settings are, but you'll have guaranteed lock height and you'll have guaranteed delay at some point. But the lock height does actually work really well. And for those who don't understand what lock height is, it means it's just going to lock, its X and Z movement, so it only goes Y up by default. This will be included in your animation height. So there's an animation of the missile flying up for a couple blocks that'll be subtracted from your launch height. So it's about the distance from where the missile spawns, and it'll be right here at this tip is where the missile spawns at, all the way up. So if you set 30 blocks, it'll be from here 30 blocks straight up is how far it will go up before then it starts curving towards the target or wherever else it wants to go. And then moving back into the radar. So for those who are familiar with the radar, you remember it as a 3D block. Now the reason why I've moved it away from a 3D block has a little bit to do with some of the future plans. We will be getting radar dishes back at some time in the future. We'll also be getting radar arrays and a few other different things. So to kind of help work with that, I've moved the block to a much more simplified view in terms of this. That way you can pretty much just embed this in a wall and it would look nice and it will fit in with your decor and what you're doing. There is the option for other mods to come in and add more visually appealing versions of this. And I do plan to do a lot more blocks involved in the radar once we get a rewrite going on that one. Now this did have kind of an animated screen going on here that would detect things nearby it. For whatever reason, that's not working right now, and I'll be fixing it here later on the stream. But we do have the UI itself working. So you still have your min range and your max range here. So the min range is when it triggers and actually will output redstone. You have a button up here to turn your redstone on and off now. So previously you had to do this by right-clicking with a redstone item. That functionality is still there. Might remove it just because the UI does things. You have your frequency. So the frequency in here is designed to work with the silos. The silos aren't set up for it just yet. They do receive the packet. They just don't know what to do with the packet. What it actually allowed for them to do is a radar could remote radio trigger and say, hey, attack this missile. So like there's a missile coming in. Here's its actual position. Here, go chase it down. That'll be implemented here eventually, but right now the signal is there. And then you have a nice pretty UI. So for those who remember what the UI looked like previously, it was much larger. I have shrunk it down just to fit inside of a standard Minecraft GUI. I am planning on making a decoration-based block that'll give you a much bigger version of this later that you'll be able to see in world. So for now, you got a little small one. This does dynamically update. So if you set that to 40, the purple will show you what's going on here. This outside can be adjusted as well. The grid here is going to stay pretty consistent on size. I just made that easy. It is dynamically rendered, so this is not part of the texture. This whole little thing here is actually being done by code. It will show you the spacing between these grids right here. It'll then show you detected entities, and it will show you incoming impact entities inside your safe zone. So if I come over here, and I'm going to reduce this down just so it makes it easier to see what's going on, and I'm going to turn on this launcher behind me real quick. I have to do a few things to it, actually, because I have disabled this when I was doing testing earlier just to kind of test a few different things. So I'll put this here, and then put that there. And you'll see that'll start firing missiles, and you'll see the animation and lock height going on, and it'll chain fire. Now, don't expect this redstone logic here to work this way. It's a bug that it's firing continuously, but I'm taking advantage of it while I can. So if we go into the radar, we'll now see little dots on here. I do plan to make these a little bit more detailed later. Just right now, due to the size of this UI, it didn't make sense to do more than dots, but you will see what's going on with that and so on. I can now change this to say 20, and we can change this to 30 just so you guys can see a lot more detail to what's going on nearby you, and you can actually see visually where these missiles are coming in and so on. This is mostly just for your guys' amusement. This doesn't do anything in reality. Most of the work itself really comes down to the fact that this system itself can emit redstone when it detects hostile threats, which then you can attach to EMP towers, SAM sites, and so on, or just alarms so your base goes and makes blare noises, or force fields because force field mod's being updated. So that's it for when it comes to progress. I'll be back with more updates, and as soon as we get things a little bit more stable, I'll start doing a little bit of tutorials to explain how all this works from start to finish.